Welcome to Choose to Challenge as Cosmopolitan Leaders, a program presented on behalf of the Ismaili Jamatkhana and Center USA. My name is Banush and I serve in a voluntary capacity as the member for communications, publications, and outreach on the Ismaili Council for the Southeastern United States. The Ismaili Jamatkhanas around the world are more than places of worship and spiritual search. These spaces hope to encourage community engagement, broaden our intellectual horizons, and foster an appreciation of pluralism. I'd like to begin today's program with a simple question. What do Denmark, Ethiopia, Finland, Germany, New Zealand, and Slovakia have in common? Well, according to UN Women, which is an entity of UN that is dedicated to gender equality and the empowerment of women, these are all countries that have been applauded for their success in handling of the pandemic, for responding to its socio and economic impacts, as well as their compassionate communication of fact-based public health data and information. It's important to also note that these countries have been headed by women leaders, whose leadership on the public health front has been widely recognized and even earned them kudos. However, today, women are heads of state and government in only about 20 countries. As we celebrate International Women's Day, a day to celebrate women's achievements, we unfortunately continue to see a system of systemic resistance to women's equality. The 2021 theme for International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge, and the topic for our program is Choose to Challenge as Cosmopolitan Leaders. When delivering the Jodidi Lecture at Harvard University in 2015, His Highness the Aga Khan said, "A pluralist, cosmopolitan society is a society which not only accepts difference, but actively seeks to understand it and to learn from it." The Ismaili Council is honored to have with us 3 women from government and civil society. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for the program, Dr. Saloni Farishta Bastani. Saloni is a professor at the Goenzada Business School at Emory University. She's a published author with her research appearing in both industry and academic journals. Welcome, Saloni.
Thank you, Dr. Momin. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very excited to be sharing the stage today with some incredible women. And what a better way to celebrate International Women's Day. Prior to accepting this request from Dr. Momin to moderate this show, I started looking up the organization and learning a little bit about their mission. And their mission is to celebrate the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of all women. The organization works towards gender equality, not that men are better than women or women are better than men, but we are equal and should be offered equal opportunities. One of the statistics that caught my eye as I was looking this up was the current timeline for women reaching equal pay and employment opportunities is 216 years. It's a bit generous, I think. And I think conversations like this, I hope we can shorten the timeline to a more timeline that fits our generation. Let me start off by introducing some incredible women, a star-studded panel that we have today. Salima Abdul Ghaffar, welcome to the show. And to many of us in Atlanta, Salima is no stranger. Salima Abdul Ghaffar is right now the Communications Division Director and Chief of Staff in the Office of the CCO for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Salima is an accomplished leader with extensive experience in global policy, advocacy, and communications. Before joining the foundation, Salima served as the founding director of the African Leaders Malaria Alliance, ALMA, which comprises of every sitting African head of state and government. Welcome, Salima.
Thank you, Dr. Saloni.
Our next panelist is Senator Mobina Jaffer. Mobina Jaffer represents the province of British Columbia in the Senate of Canada. She's the first Muslim senator, the first African-born senator, and the first senator of South Asian descent. She was a Canadian envoy to the Sudan peace process. By profession, Senator Jaffar is a lawyer and has worked extensively to increase participation of women and incorporate gender perspectives in all of United Nations peace and security efforts. The Women's Executive Network named Senator Jaffar among Canada's top 100 most powerful women in 2003 and 2004. Welcome, Senator Jaffar.
Thanks, Zaina.
I must add to this that Senator Jaffar, as we were talking before this panel, is a mother of two and a grandmother of two children. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Anna Chefton as our next panelist and serves as the Southeast and Caribbean Division Vice President for American Red Cross. She has extensive experience in collaborating with chapter boards, volunteers, government agencies, elected officials, and other nonprofit partners to strengthen community presence. Responsible for disaster services, international service support, biomedical services, she has a lot on her plate. Prior to her work with the Red Cross, Anna worked for a computer sciences corporation in the human resources as the Equal Opportunity Affirmative Action Officer in Houston, Texas. And she was assigned to the Johnson Space Center. Welcome, Anna. And I understand from our conversation as well, and I would like to share with the audience that you're a mother of two and a grandmother of five.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here.
Well, welcome to all our panelists, and we'll get started. The campaign theme, as Dr. Momin mentioned, for International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge. A challenged world is an alert world. Individually, we are all responsible for our own thoughts and actions all day and every day. We can choose to challenge and call out gender biases and inequality. We can all choose to seek out and celebrate women's achievements. Collectively, we can all help create this inclusive world that is right now 216 years out. From the challenge comes change. So we'll choose to challenge. But before we jump on to that towards the end of our program, I would like to begin by asking each one of you to briefly describe what you chose to challenge to reach the position you have today. Salima, could you go first?
You know, I thought about, so first let me say thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I have followed and observed His Highness's work around the world for quite some time, and I'm grateful to be in this forum, and I'm grateful for the example that he has set for his generosity. And there are people like Dr. Gulshan Harji who have been a real embodiment of his work and his legacy in the world. I think when you asked that question, the first thing that came to me was that you've probably heard this data that says when a woman goes after a position, she looks to see how many of the qualifications she meets. And then if she, at 70, 80, 90%, then she goes for it. But when a man does, he's like, I've got 40%, I'm good. And I'm running after it. And I actually had that experience. I was actually recruited by the Gates Foundation and did not anticipate the recruitment. And my first thought was, but then I was like, no, they're choosing me because they've observed my work over a decade and have funded my work over a decade. So I had that moment too, where I had a little bit of self-doubt and a little bit of, I'm not ready. And then I said, I am a believing woman. And if Allah has given this opportunity to me at this time in this place, then any skills that I don't have, I will quickly attain so that I can do this. So I think just the idea of understanding and knowing that you are ready, if, personally, I'm a Muslim woman, if Allah has put me in, and I belong there, and I'll have what I need to be successful there and to add value and to be of benefit. So that's my answer.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarima. So congratulations on this wonderful accomplishment. Senator Jaffer, can we go with you next?
Yes, thank you. For me, from when I was a very little girl, His Highness's guidance that I could do anything, I could achieve anything. And with my parents who inspired me to reach a position I have today. In fact, they always assured me that I could do whatever I set my mind to, and that no dream was out of reach as long as I was willing to work hard. And politics was always something that interested me. My father was a member of parliament in Uganda, and so I watched him use his position to empower people, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be there to be of service. I learned from him, and I became involved very soon after I arrived as a refugee in Canada. My son and I both held several positions in the Liberal Party, and in 2001, the then Prime Minister Chrétien appointed me to the Senate. And so it was my real honor to be a senator. I've been a senator for almost 20 years. It's the best job I could possibly have. I learned so much, and I'm able to travel all over the world. I was the peace envoy for 5 years, so I have felt very fulfilled in my job.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So we have Salima who said, don't self-doubt. Senator Jaffer said, dream high. Anna, could you share to this story?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. It's really an honor to be here, and I love the Choose Challenge thing. Like the other panelists, it's kind of hard to pick just one moment that inspired me to choose to challenge. Growing up in the late 60s, high school in the late 70s, and college in the early 80s, I think I had to choose to challenge in everything I did. The first time I remember choosing to challenge was when I ran for 8th grade class president against a male student, and a teacher said to me, I wish you would run for vice president, you might win. It had never occurred to me I couldn't be president. In high school, I was very active in student government and other clubs, always running for an office and often not being successful, but I had to choose to challenge. So out of college, I got a degree. At that point, it was primarily a male-dominated degree, and I worked at the Space Center Space Shuttle program. My parents and grandparents were always so supportive, especially my father and grandfather. Their favorite saying was, don't let anyone tell you that they are better than you, never believe someone is better than you, and never believe that you're better than someone else. If I had doubt, they would say to me very strongly, no one is better than you. I was so fortunate to have this strong background, especially being a female in the late 60s and early 70s. The American Red Cross, our history and mission is one reason I was attracted to work here. We've always had strong female leadership, starting with Clara Barton, our founder, and she's famous for saying, I have an almost complete disregard of precedent and a faith in the possibility of something better. The Red Cross believes in humanitarian principles. They are, strong in diversity and inclusion. I've been so fortunate to move progressively up through the organization and being able to help so many people through disaster services and blood collections. And, one of the most memorable moments for me was Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. And, just being there with the individuals and helping them after that hurricane. Sandy, Wilma, Katrina, all those hurricanes, you see so many women that are impacted. It just was something that, helped me choose to challenge and stay here for 30 years and take on almost 1/6 of the country plus Caribbean. So it's really grateful to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to choose to challenge on here.
All right, wonderful, wonderful, Anna. While we're talking about the American Red Cross, they've been recognized for the international one of the top for international humanitarian relief organizations. Over the past several years, the world has come to witness increased inequalities and compounded with man-made disasters and natural disasters. We also see an increased refugee migration pictures of women and children as casualties of civil strife. Is the plight of women, you think, getting worse, or is there hope? As a woman in the forefront of a disaster relief organization, how have you see to see a change in that front?
So, we've seen increasing disasters across the globe, and 1 in 97 individuals across the world are refugees, and women and children are definitely the majority of the refugees. We see refugees from in the Bangladesh camp, the Rohingya. Most of the refugees there are women and children, and I just believe that that there is hope, because we see that women are coming forward when they have the funds to support, when they're given grants like the Gates Foundation gives to women, and other organizations like the American Red Cross. They spend it on their families, and they spend it to increase their ability to continue to take care of their families. My favorite story is of Sukatara. She is in the refugee camp in Bangladesh, and she is a Red Cross volunteer. She is helping the women there understand, how to help themselves in the camp and to take care of the individuals that are in the camp. And so she says that she's uniquely positioned to really be able to support the individuals that she is working with. So, around the world, the Red Cross and Red Crescent societies continually help and support. And there's so much hope when you have helpers doing that, like the distinguished individuals on this panel. It's just amazing what we can do when we set our minds to it.
Yeah, thank you, Anna, for that. That's really insightful. Salima, going on to the next question here, building up on what Anna just said. You worked extensively with multiple heads of states to improve women and children's health, particularly in Sub-Saharan Africa. You've also been one of the organizers of Women-Led Prayer in New York City, which opened the national conversation about how Muslim women can participate in various communities. My question to you is two-part. How do you define a cosmopolitan ethic? And B, as a Muslim woman leader, do you see gender scrutiny of your leadership style?
Great question. I want to take just a short time and frame the woman-led prayer for people who are watching who don't know. So it was actually, we did it in 2005. I organized it with a small group of friends across the country, all of us Muslim women, all of us incredibly disappointed with the way we saw Muslim women's leadership in mostly American mosques. And I should say, for the purpose of this, mostly Sunni American mosques, where you would have women who couldn't come to pray because there was no space for them, or the space was inferior, or downstairs around the corner in the dark. Women didn't sit on boards. And we were tired of seeing the disconnect between what we know Allah has said in terms of women's equality and how it manifested in our communities. And we asked the scholars, Dr. Amina Wadud was one of them. She is a very well-known African-American Muslim woman who has scholars of Islam, and they said, well, actually, women can lead prayer. They can lead congregational prayer, and they can lead both women and men in congregational prayer. And the evidence of that is there are many pieces of it, but part of the Prophet Muhammad's tradition is he actually, a woman came to him and said, oh, there's no man to lead prayer in my area. Can I? And he said, you should lead it. You are a learned woman. And he said, Waraka, go and lead the prayer. Lead the men and the women in prayer. When you tell a woman that she cannot lead another man in prayer, you remove her from most leadership positions in society. You take away her voice, you take away her participation, you take away her space in community. And then the excuse for that we'd often hear is, well, if a woman stands before a man and bends over, then, he'll just be so taken sexually, he won't be able to focus on God. And so we called that for what it was, VS. And we said, listen, we have consulted the scholars. At the time, Al-Azhar University even said, yes, this is true. We've known this. But no one was practicing it as we saw it, particularly in the Western world. So we hosted this prayer in 2005 in New York City. And it started a national dialogue, but also an international dialogue about how Muslim women participate in prayer, in communities. And the goal was to spark the conversation. It was not to say all Muslim communities should be this way, but it was to say that there's a piece of Islamic history that you've missed. And it is at best, a gross injustice to keep women from this role. And so since that, you've seen much, particularly in America and particularly in Western Europe, you've seen much more participation of American Muslim women, of European women participating in their communities, leading prayer, sitting on boards, being a vocal and active part of the evolution of their communities. So I just wanted to frame that quickly, take a second. Now, on the cosmopolitan ethic, this is one that I thank you so much for, because I had not heard this term, but when I had the opportunity to read His Highness's comments on it, I thought, oh, this is beautiful, right? Because these are the universal values that all faiths share, right? All of the Abrahamic faiths, the Eastern faith, most religions have these universal values that speak to mercy and peace and gratitude and generosity, and our responsibility as human beings on this earth to take care of each other. And so I was like, and there it is in our Ismaili tradition. So it helped me to understand, again, it reinforced the idea that we all care for each other, even if we pray differently, even if we believe some things differently, the fundamentals are still there. So I appreciate the learning for me around the cosmopolitan ethic. Around your question on leadership skills and do I receive greater scrutiny? To be honest, yes. To be honest, the older I get, the less I care. When we did the prayer in 2005, I received so much hate and backlash, and we had to have private security. We had to have, we had to move the venue because there were death threats. And I'll say my father, who has since transitioned, people actually called my father and said, your daughter's soul is in jeopardy because of the work she's doing. That's how much, and these are Muslims, right? So these are people in my community that knew me, that had watched me grow up, that had watched me evolve. And she's working to allow women to lead prayer. Now, at the time, it was incredibly stressful. It was really difficult for me, and I felt very alone. My father said, if anybody gives you anything about it, what would he say? If anybody gives you anything about it, tell them to come see me. That's exactly what he said to me, my father. And that has been the mark, that has been the starting point where I have cared less and less about what other people think about what I'm doing, and more that the work is what I believe I should be doing. And I believe that I have been given a set of skills and talents that I'm to use to help other people in my community and around the world. And I've done that with voter registration here in Georgia. I've done that with my global health work. And I'm going to continue to do that and care less and less about what people see, because I'm happier and I know that my work is important and adds value.
Thank you for that, Salima. Such a beautiful story. And thank you for adding context on the New York prayer. I didn't have the whole story there. And what an amazing father, right? To be able to support like that. So I also want to congratulate all the men in our lives that have supported us as husbands, as brothers, as spouses, that continue to push us forward. And to bring about an important point, Salima, that it's not only important to tolerate, right, the differences that we have, and
I wouldn't even say
yes.
tolerate.
Yeah.
Because tolerate can be a word that has a little bit of ick on it too, right?
Yeah.
Like the world, we all belong here. And how do you know that? Because we're here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, this stirred me up with my father. But we know that we belong here. And it's not for any person to say that we don't.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's very well put. So I think we need a better word than tolerate, right? And a word that comes to mind is pluralism. Pluralism, is not where you just tolerate each other's differences, but also celebrate each other's differences. And Mabina, I have my next question for you, since your adopted home is in a place where His Highness has established the Global Center for Pluralism, with the objective of deepening the understanding of this word pluralism and the idea behind it, where we not just tolerate each other's differences, but celebrate each other's differences. My question to you is, why Canada? And how has Canada, the Canadian context in general, shaped your leadership style as a woman?
Thank you very much. But before I answer that, I want to say to Salima that you may have felt very alone with what you were doing, but here in Canada, we were watching what you were doing. And you gave us all a lot of strength. I can tell you that a lot of women across the world took from your courage. And so thank you for doing that. And, sorry we didn't send you more wives to make you even more courageous. But I want to thank you. As a Muslim woman, I couldn't get over your courage. So thank you for doing that. And, as the Global Center for Pluralism, I feel so blessed that His Highness decided that it would be in Canada. And I have to admit to you that I asked him, and I also was thinking, why here? And if you read his speeches, he will say, why here? Because, there is this perception that Canada is very diverse and pluralistic, and so this is the right place. But as a politician, there is still work to do. There's still a lot of work to do in diversity, and I fight for that all the time. But his idea of having a center for pluralism here, which represents a partnership, it's a very unique thing. It's a unique partnership between the Ismaili Imamate and Canada, which was inspired by a shared understanding of the importance that pluralism must play in the interconnected world. And what is really interesting, that this commitment from the Canadian government is not by a specific party. It started off with Mr. Chrétien, the Prime Minister Chrétien, and then Prime Minister Martin, and then Prime Minister Harper, and then Prime Minister Trudeau, all of whom who have contributed to the creation of the institution. So it's like from one party or another, it's Canadian leaders coming together. And it is a time where politics we're becoming extremely divisive. The Global Center for Pluralism is a reminder that diversity is not a weakness, but instead it is a powerful force for good. That values of tolerance, justice, pluralism, and mutual respect are very much part of the Canadian identity. But we want to I don't want to say just Canadian identity. That is our identity all across the world. And especially when we're looking at the International Women's Day, like without women, there cannot be diversity. And also with the Canadian Center of Pluralism, His Highness picked this country because he felt that this was the right place for Canada to be that place. And I want to give you an example of why I get quite emotional, because I'm a refugee from Uganda. And Canada welcomed me with open arms, so much so that the day as a refugee, the day I landed here, after all these years, 45 years, 50 years later, I will never forget my journey, that I got support from people. And, I'm a daughter of a politician, and I always felt that how could I become a politician in a country where I was a refugee? But very quickly, I did not feel that I was a refugee. And very quickly, I felt I was a Canadian, and I wanted to serve my country. So Canada is now my country. And so when you said adopted for a minute, I was taken back because I'm not adopted. This is my country. And that's why His Highness chose this place, because we all feel we belong here. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful story and your journey to be here. As we've started talking about our families and moving, and I want to ask you about your mother's battle with cancer. And you shared that a little bit. Wanted to see how that has influenced and motivated you. And how does that influence and motivate a young girl? So if you could share your story, that would be great.
Sure. So, I do, before I share that information, I want to just also celebrate the conversation we just had. Working for an organization that's founded on humanitarian principles, international humanitarian law, and the rights of others to be treated fairly and equitably. The conversation we just had about how we support unity, how we support individuals across the world is just so inspiring. And I have to do a shout out for that, because we see it every day, and we help people at the worst moment in their lives. And when you see that there are so many people working together to further the mission of, the justice movement and others, it's just very inspiring. And, the refugee situation that you talked about in Canada being your home, I so relate to that, because the American Red Cross became my home and really was what helped me get through the death of my mother. There are so many ways that the health of a mother affects her children. My mother had ovarian cancer, and it's so hard to talk about it because she missed so many of my milestones. She was sick. She was in hospitals. She received multiple blood transfusions, and it just affected our family so much in so many ways. In many ways, it was hard to choose to challenge when you were going through what we were going through, and I did act out. And so the health of the mother affects the family, because there are times when the family is struggling, but they don't feel like they can talk about it with the one person in their life that means the most, which is their mother, right? They can't share their feelings because they've got to be there to support their mother. And when you're younger, I had two older sisters and my dad was working. And so I was there in the home while she was going through all of this, up until I graduated from college. It started early, and it went through when I graduated from college. And it really was very difficult. And so I see that across the globe when heads of households or the parents or the mothers, and they become ill, it's so hard for the children to recover. But the important part is to remember there are people like all of us on this panel who are helpers. And I talked about that earlier, because the more people are involved in supporting the community, the more they're involved in supporting outside of their own space, the more they promote and support the right thing to do, which is what we're talking about on this call, right?
Yeah.
And so just being active, being participant, I encourage anyone in that situation to have their children participate and to support others. I'm a regular blood donor as a result of what happened to my mother, and then I'm with the American Red Cross because of that, because I saw the life-saving blood that they could provide for her. There are so many times when you look at the world and you say, what can I do when you're in that situation? And your mother feels helpless because she can't do her job. And the women who are in that feel helpless too. But you can do something that makes difference. And blood collection, blood transfusions are just something that I'm so proud to be a part of. We hold about 500 blood drives a year, collecting over 500 a day, collecting over 13,000 units in a day. And we need those blood platelets. And so the blood collected by the American Red Cross is used in so many ways. If you think about the convalescent plasma for the COVID patients who are going through what they're going through now, and it's the treatment in the hospitals for severe COVID individuals that are severely affected by COVID. And then the cancer patients who need the platelets, trauma patients who need the platelets, just doing something to give back. It sounds like it's simple, but donating blood and getting out and volunteering in your community really does make a difference and help the world be a much better place.
Yeah. Thank you, Anna, for that. And, I think you articulated that very well, and how a whole community can come together and, to support a young girl and, going through, when her mother's going through illness, how we can, do blood drives, and how we don't always have to depend on somebody else, right, to do the work. We as a community can come together and help each other and do what we need to do to support a system. It takes a village, right? And this is the village, and sometimes the village is virtual, or and whoever's going through that, the community comes together. This reminds me of a quote by someone. Says, "Communities are the heart of successful policy initiative and success." And that's a great quote, and we are very fortunate to have the person who had that quote here. So, Mabina, can you share with us how, as a member of the Ismaili community, and what has been the impact of His Highness Yar Khan's work over decades in promoting and supporting women through difficult times and setting up institutions to do that? And if you could also add to that and share the impact on your personal life, and what have you observed globally or in Canada in this regard?
So, speaking generally, His Highness's impact for Ismaili women and women around the world is that, he talks about equality of women, but he doesn't just talk about it. Mm-hmm. He invests resources and a lot of his valuable time in building schools, in building health centers. He's right there on the ground helping. And I was born in a country where we didn't have many resources, and I went to Aga Khan kindergarten. I went to Aga Khan elementary school. I went to Aga Khan high school. And I can say today that the education I received in those institutions, because at that time, His Highness personally sent teachers. He personally sent teachers to the schools. And so I received the best education. I often tell my children, I received better education in Uganda than you received here. So that's the kind of commitment he has. And I know that later on, when I became a lawyer, it was because of the foundation he enabled me to have. And, that's what His Highness's work does on the ground. And now I see, that he's doing a lot of work in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and many women nurses, surgeons, doctors, accountants, encouraged to further their studies. And I believe that he has led by example. And even when I became a politician, I truly feel that he and the community's support, and that my own family. My father is the biggest supporter, as you heard, of fathers, and he's my biggest supporter. And I was the envoy to Sudan, and I was negotiating peace on behalf of Uganda, of Canada, and with the different rebels. There was a time when I was the only person who could go to all the parts of Sudan, because the leaders, it was divided. And I would joke and say, I've been to your homeland, to Garang, or I would joke with Bashir in the sense that I know what that part of the country looks like. You don't I know what you've done there in Darfur. You don't, because you haven't been there. And one of the biggest gift I have is that as a Muslim woman, often I would go into a war zone, and the sheikhs there or the leaders would say, "What are you talking about? There's no rape here. Muslim men don't rape." And I could stand and look them in the eye and say to them, "Don't give me that. Don't give me that. I'm a Muslim woman and I know what you're talking about. We're talking here. We are going to make changes." And that all comes with the foundation that I was given from His Highness and my parents, that you can do anything and you can stand up to anything. And that's the gift His Highness the Aga Khan has given, not just to me, but to thousands and thousands of girls and women around the world. And when you don't often, I don't often thank him, in the sense I'm not often thinking nowadays that of all the gifts he's given to me. But I can say one thing, that he doesn't have a public relations office telling people how much work he does and how much he empowers women. But what he has done is every woman is there because every Ismaili woman, because he says he believes in women's education. And on International Women's Day, that's the greatest gift he has given to us. And I am very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravina, for those lovely words. And education is a big level setter, right, for women in terms of achieving equality. My father sent me here to the U.S. to study and against social norms. So we cherish that opportunity to gain knowledge. His Highness's grandfather actually in 1945 said that, and I quote, that if I had two children and one of them was a boy and one of them was a girl, and if I could afford to educate only one, I would have no hesitation in giving the higher education to the girl. And he goes on to say that the man could concentrate on manual effort to earn a livelihood, but the woman had to maintain a home life and to bring up children. Her influence in the family was enormous to the future generations.
And Salome, that he said that, but to this day, the community believes that. And to this day, our women in the Ismaili community are very educated because of what His Highness the Aga Khan, the previous Aga Khan said, and the present Aga Khan is continuing. And that's the gift they've given us.
Yes, absolutely. That was my ticket to come to the US. That's what I had to show my father. And he well-hearted supported me. Salima, as we're talking about education being a level setter for women and opportunities to reach equal gender equality in general, you've done incredible amounts of work on gender equality, especially in the Muslim communities. Do you see that there's a special need in the Muslim community as opposed to other faiths that we should be cognizant of?
I'm not sure that I don't want to get into sort of comparing and other faith communities, but I want to say in the Muslim community, which is my community, we must do more now. We know that discrimination exists. We know that there is injustice because we are women. And that is not just in Pakistan or Nigeria. It's also right here in Atlanta and in New York and in Chicago. Muslim women struggle in Muslim communities. And we know that we have God-given rights of equality. We have rights over ourselves, over our family, over our community. We know that we are equal in all the ways that matter. And yet, that is not always reflected in our communities. And it does not serve us to sugarcoat that or to, no, we don't want to share our dirty laundry or we don't want to let outsiders know. That just keeps the cancer growing and metastasizing. So I am a big believer in speaking the truth, even if it's against myself. And I come from mostly African American Muslim community, but also mixed Muslim communities, largely on the East Coast, and we must do more for women in our community. And what I would urge people to do is just ask a woman. But don't come up with your own agenda. Don't come up with your own plan. Don't sit in a room with a bunch of men and say, this is what the women get. Just invite some women to the space and have them feel welcomed. Let them feel that they belong, as God has already said, as God has intended, and then go from there. But there are significant issues of everything from domestic violence to abuse in marriage, sexual abuse, all sorts of things, which are reflections of our larger communities and societies. This is not something that's special to the Muslim community. We're human and we have significant issues. And we know that this is not what God has for us. And I'm so grateful to be on this panel with other Muslim women who have led in this regard and who are leading in this regard to make sure that our daughters and granddaughters and nieces and neighbors and who are female have every opportunity that they possibly can. So I am a part of many interfaith conversations, and I know that the struggles are similar in other faith traditions here and abroad. But since I'm Muslim, I feel more legitimacy talking about my own community, and I know that we can do more.
Great. Thank you, Salima. And let me ask you, Salima, while you're in the camera view here, what message would you like to share with today's young adults, both female and perhaps some males that are listening to us today, as they embark on their university or professional careers?
You know, this is an excellent question. I was in a group recently, and some comments were made, and I had the thought of being an African American Muslim woman has meant that I have evolved and grown largely under the gaze of other people, and so I have adjusted my behavior, the way that I speak, the things that I pursue, giving a great deal of consideration to external forces, if that makes sense. And I became sad because I was like, who would I be if I just evolved as God has intended me to, right? Without people in my ear saying, do this, don't do that, you're too big, you're too loud, you speak too much, too opinionated, right? Like, what if I hadn't had any of that noise and just evolved? Like, who could I be and who would I be? And it made me sad. So when I see people who are younger than me now, what I hope and pray is that wherever they are able to evolve as God intended them, and to grow into who they are without giving too much authority to external voices. And I hope that makes sense. People, I think in the previous forum, people understood it, but young people have so much pressure. They have so much pressure from their family. They have so much pressure from their parents, so much pressure from their peers, so much pressure. And there's so much coming in through so many channels: TV, iPhone, apps, school, I'm home, all of these different things. It's like, how can you ground yourself in well-being and then have the courage to continue to evolve, even if how you're evolving is not what the people in your group want you to do? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's what I want for young people, because when young people speak for themselves, act for themselves, they're brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And they literally shift consciousness, the world. You look at a crowd like Greta Thunberg, right? Like who has autism and who was who many would put her in a corner and say, go, speak don't speak, we don't want to hear you, and we can't understand
Yeah.
you, right? But
Yeah.
yet she had a family that let her evolve, let her grow, let her develop, and she is not single-handedly, but in partnership, changing the way we think about protecting the earth and our natural resources.
Yeah.
I want more young people to have the experience of being the best that they can be.
Yeah. Very good. Very well said, Sullivan. How often have we heard, people saying to other, be like a girl, or walk like a girl, or sit like a girl, right? And all those kind of are voices that we grew up with. So beautifully said. And I will move to you with the same question, and then to Mabina. What message would you like to share with the audience today?
Absolutely. I would echo what we just heard and echo it very loudly. One of the first advice that I would give anyone, whether they want to be involved in nonprofit or civic work or for-profit entities, is get involved in your community, join civic groups, be on a nonprofit board. Organizations are changing rapidly. The world is changing rapidly, and we have to adapt to our current environment. We've really seen this change quite a bit by the external forces we had to deal with past year with the pandemic, fight for racial justice and women's rights, political discourse, climate change. There's so much that we can make a difference, and women do make a difference. And the biggest mistake I see individuals is focusing more on themselves versus getting a good understanding of others, the world around you. How do you interact with the world around you, and how do you find that voice that's yours and not the voice you've been told to have? So the second thing is I encourage everyone to be an agent of change and to support each other. That's the other thing that I've seen throughout my career for 30 years of work, internal or external in other organizations, is that you need to be the agent of change to support each other and the community. I would echo what my grandfather and father told me to every woman that is watching this today and every male who is watching this today. Remember, no one is better than you, and never think you're better than others. Find your own voice. How you perceive yourself and others is so critical to being a strong leader. Having strong values that guide you, set your foundation, have that stake in the ground. Be there to rise above the hatred, the violence, and injustices by denouncing gender and racial biases and inequality. It starts with you, how you treat others and how you advocate for that common good. I would say make this commitment early. I hope that we have young women on the program watching today, and I hope that they will also do that and that they'll start early in their life. Run for run for SBA president, not the vice president. Choose to challenge and look for that leadership role that will help you make a change in the world.
Great. Thank you, Anna, for those beautiful messages. I've taken a note of them myself, and that's very well said. Mabina, can you share with us what you would like the audience to take away, what message that you would like to take the audience to take away today?
So I want to say to those who are listening, to learn from mine and other people's examples. I always wanted to be a lawyer because I always had this idea that I could argue anybody out of anything. And so, in my time, there were not many women lawyers. And every time I said that, people would say to me, no, what you mean is you become a secretary. You can't be a lawyer. And I would just ignore them. And my father would always say, ignore them. It's not about them. And I would look at His Highness's guidance, how much he invested in women and how much he wanted women to get education, even at that time. And so I attended Queen Mary College in London, England, and did my law degree there. And then when I became a lawyer, people would say to me, stay home. You're a mother, stay home. And I was said that I would not listen to those voices. I carved my own way because I thought that I'm not listening to that. I want to be a lawyer. And I did become a lawyer. And if I may say so, successful lawyer. And but that was 50 years ago. I'm aging myself. This is a long time ago I'm talking. And so I want to say to people that, yes, my journey was very bumpy at times, being married with a large extended family, 2 children. But I never, ever, ever gave up on my dream, because my father would always say to me, what's wrong with you? You carve your own way, you find your own pathway. Because there were not any women like me, around. Yes, there was gender equality, but when they talked about gender equality, it's for white women, not for women who looked like me. And that was the challenge. I would tell white women, stop. You can't just take white women ahead. Because who am I? I'm a woman, and I'm a woman of color. If you just take women through, then what about my color? You have to take all of us in. And so I never gave up on my dreams. And in this International Women's Day, I want to say to everyone that's listening, dream of whatever you want to become, and absolutely don't let anybody rob your dream. You know you will achieve it. Invest in it, invest in your dream, and nobody can rob it. But you have to first believe in it.
Thank you for those beautiful words, Senator Jaffer, and we have a lot of takeaways here from not getting bought into the society stereotypes and conversations, to becoming agents of change in our community, to dreaming big and carving our own paths here. So great panel. I would like to end with asking you how you are planning to celebrate International Women's Day tomorrow. How are you planning to treat yourself and celebrate all the things that you've done and are continuing to do? Anna?
Sure, absolutely. So with my daughters and granddaughters, we like to have a spa day. So we plan to do that together, because that's something we really enjoy and have the opportunity to connect. I made a decision early on when my mother was so ill that I would have a strong family bond with my children. Even though I worked constantly for 30 years, I would always find the time to do that, the plan to do that. We will also celebrate Women's Day, International Women's Day, with my team. We will have a live Teams event tomorrow on the 8th, and we plan to really do that so that we can showcase what is so important, and hopefully show this program.
Great, thank you for that. Mubina Jaffer, Senator Jaffer.
Yeah, thank you. The first thing I'm going to do is get up in the Senate and talk about why International Women's Day is so important. And when I talk about International Women's Day, I always now remind senators that it's not about taking some women in and saying we've arrived. Every woman needs to count. Every woman needs to count. And I will set out all the challenges that women have. Women of color, Aboriginal women, Indigenous women, all women have to be in if we are really going to have an International Women's Day. And then for fun, I will, because we're doing everything virtually at the moment, I will call all my daughter-in-law, my granddaughter, and my nieces, and we will celebrate with a good meal virtually.
Fantastic, thank you. Salima, what about you? How are you treating yourselves tomorrow?
I love the ideas that have come forth. This is a great question. Thank you for asking, Dr. Salone. I'm moderating tomorrow the International Women's Forum's program here in Atlanta. It's an international group focused on nurturing senior leaders in the private sector. So that will be an conversation that profiles many of the women in our community who are doing good work. And then I will rest. I have taken on rest as a new mantra for myself. I am my best after rest. So rest for me means, no work, unplugging, good food, and the people who love me most.
Well, thank you. That sounds like a splendid day. With that, I'd like to wrap up this panel. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. I feel like I have so much to learn and we could keep talking. But I know it's our time to go our parts right now. I also want to thank the audience for listening. I want to thank all the women out there that are working towards gender equality, and all the men, in fact, that are also working to support us and celebrating with us. And the volunteers that also made this program happen. There's a lot of people in the background making this work and working tirelessly to put this together. So I want to take the time to thank them. I hope you have enjoyed this program, and I hope you challenge yourself today and put a challenge to yourself you can post it on social media at #ChooseToChallenge. I hope this is not the end of the conversations, but the beginning of new challenges, of supporting each other as a community, as dreaming big, and not doubting what we can accomplish. Happy International Women's Day to all of you out there. I hope you are going out there celebrating and also treating yourself for everything that we've done so far. Thank you.